Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Garamond room. A specific ask for a sans serif room, but I was not given, so we'll deal with this. We have a fantastic panel for you today, but I have to thank a couple of organizations and people before we move forward. The programming for MoCA 2019 is sponsored by the Continuing Education Division of the School of Visual Arts, and it's been a fantastic collaboration with them. I want to thank Annette Miller for listening to my crazy idea and bringing us together, and Bill Kartalopoulos for having been a great educator for me as far as comics go and a great collaborator in developing this. From the turnout, my fears or concern that there are not a lot of panels such as this, speaking directly truth to the core of the professional life of an artist. And I am super privileged to have such a panel today with us. I will make a little correction. We called, Matt actually sent me an email. He said, I've been called an art director twice already. And I'm an artist and an editor. And I want to say that we use the term art director to generally describe someone that assigns artwork. That is the deciding factor in hiring someone to create an image as a commission. That is the way we make a living. So we will keep the conversation very professional and practical, going to not psychological, esoteric, or existential matters that are very important to illustration, image making, comics, and cartooning. But we have very specific people behind those tables, and we're going to get very specific answers about what is happening on the other side. Because we do call them the others, and we want to know how all of this works. I know that advice is only good when you know where it's coming from, so I will have some images for each and every one of our panelists. They will introduce themselves exactly the way they would like to do it, and maybe just say a couple of things of the things that we will see. So we actually brought visuals to back up their experience. It's not their titles that we're interested in, but it's really the experience that they bring in what they're looking for, how they're looking for it, where do they find it, and another number of questions that I'm mysteriously keeping secret from them to see what they think. So we will move first with Emma Allen. Hi, Emma.
Hi. These are some things. Yeah, so you asked, I also don't think of myself as an art director. I came to editing cartoons more through editing humor, more written humor. So I edit Daily Shouts on NewYorker.com, and now the gag cartoons, and now this sort of like various hybrid things that have come out of that combination. So there are both comic strips in the magazine, longer form comics online, and also editorial daily comics that we post every morning. So yeah, I wear some hats.
Okay, wonderful. Matt?
Yeah, I sound like a real prima donna now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was just trying. I didn't want to.
How dare you
I was
call
like,
me.
yeah. Well, anyways, okay. So I'm the associate editor of the Nib, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's a nonfiction comics website. We do comics journalism, memoir, and daily political cartoons. But we also recently launched a print quarterly. These are the first. That's the second and the third cover by Jillian Tamaki and Mr. Fish, respectively, left to right. Yeah. And I'm also a cartoonist for the Nib Weekly, and these are some of my my personal work here.
I'm at the New Yorker. Did I say that?
You left that.
Okay, cool.
It's on different websites, Daily Shouts.
Hi, I'm Will. For the last 4.5 years, I've been in-house at BuzzFeed, where my title was illustration director, which I've met one other person in the world who has that weird title. And during my time there, I was able to commission artists to do visual essays, such as these, Jeremy Sorese and Mari Naomi. And then while I was there, they wanted to do more with distributed social content that would go on platforms like Facebook and Instagram, and comics turned out to be really good for sharing. And so I was able to commission all these wonderful people to make comics. I make my own comics too.
Alexandra?
Yeah.
Hi. So my name's Alexandra. For 7 years, I was an art director for the opinion section at the New York Times. And for a lot of that period, I was the art director for the Sunday Review section. So I was commissioning a lot of illustration because each section each week had around 10 illustrations. Now I'm working part-time there as a way to spend more time working on my own art practice, and I'm also consulting for other media companies, trying to match them with artists that fit their content.
The first question is, what are art directors looking for? And I was trying to figure out if this is a naive question. It's like they're looking for great work. But each and every one of you is looking for something different. Is that correct, Emma?
I get to go first always. Yeah, I mean, I always say it is a hard question to answer because I feel like my answer is inevitably like really innovative work I've never seen before. But the truth is that the volume of, certainly with gag cartoons that comes in, it's about 1,000 cartoons a week. We end up buying 15. And beyond that, even with pitches for longer form things, really it's like anything that manages to both surprise and resonate, which seems sort of conflicting. Like surprise is like, wow, I've never seen anything like this before in terms of voice or style or subject matter, but then also resonate in terms of like, wow, this is something that like I relate to so deeply that has been expressed in a way that feels new or sort of concise or yeah, so it is a miserable question to answer because it's like, just like be really good at what you do and then we'll buy it. But honestly, yeah, it's the rote repetition of looking at thing after thing, especially when it comes to humor and just like waiting to laugh. It's hard when you've been reading jokes for 4 hours to summon a laugh. And if you can crack that, then you're in. And yeah, luckily I have a very low bar for I'll laugh at anything. So.
Is it as funny at the New York Times?
Well, yeah, I would say that there's not as much an emphasis on humor. You know, so many of the articles that I was commissioning were on Social Security, a lot, of course, about Trump, a lot about, politics or psychology. So really what we were looking for were artists that could, through an image, capture the main idea of a story. So say, you can usually summarize an article in one sentence that captures that core concept. And the job of an editorial illustrator for us is to visualize that core idea. And so that's a tricky thing, and it takes a really, special illustrator to do it. There are a lot of really amazing people that are really good at that. So that's usually what we would be looking for, kind of conceptual approaches.
I guess the nib it's a little specific because we kind of run 3 types of things, and I guess like on the political satire front, it's like very similar to the New Yorker. We're just looking at so much. We get so many pitches, and a lot of them are the same thing. Like people are all rushed to make the same joke, and kind of don't go with your first idea when it comes to political satire because someone has already thought of it, and people are faster than you, and like don't like a late night-esque joke is just not what we're looking for generally. And for the long form stuff that we publish, memoir and journalism, it's kind of like an interesting story that that hasn't already been covered to death, and or an interesting point of view that people don't hear from enough. And also, it has to be a comic for a reason, because a lot of the time people just come at us with, here's the thing I'm interested in. Why is it a comic? I don't know, because I'm a cartoonist and I liked it, which is not a great reason for something to be a comic, because a comic is a specific medium to tell specific types of stories that have a strong visual element,
BuzzFeed was unique in some ways, I think, because we would commission for the visual essays. It was very similar. It was like they had a point of view, and it needed to be in a visual form for some reason, and that was really fun and exciting. When we started doing the BuzzFeed comics, which were meant to be shareable and distributed, and kind of needed to survive, like as these artifacts that were just going out into the world, we looked for people who knew how to make content that would not only make you laugh, but also be like, I have to show this to my mom and my Aunt Wanda and everybody. And so we started.
Shout out to Wanda.
You do have an Aunt Wanda? Okay. I do. She's like 95, and she's still the most active person I know on Facebook. The reality of a lot of what she posts is in question, but so that was an interesting factor for me, and as somebody who came up expecting to do more editorial illustration and art directing towards that, this idea of shareability and what makes people not just laugh but pass it on was interesting.
I would like to go a little bit into how does one find work that they would like to publish? How do they look for the work and how do they find it? Is there a surprise in all of this? Because all of you are kind of coming to these positions with a toolbox full of people that you would like to use or that you have used that also puts your aesthetic signature and styling in the sections that you edit or you art direct.
Should we do reverse order?
Yeah.
Reverse order?
Okay. Yeah, I got the mic right here. Yes. Once again, because we were looking for people who knew how to make stuff that would do well on social media, we looked for people who were doing well on social media. Or one of the nice things that we had at BuzzFeed was we had a team of in-house art people, and they still do. Full disclosure, I'm no longer at BuzzFeed. So I hope nobody came here to get direct work from BuzzFeed, because I can no longer give that to you. But so it was nice because we had a group of in-house people who were actually making a lot of this content too. And so a lot of times we would commission people who they would suggest we look at because they were just so damn good at what we were looking for anyway. So looking for people who are already doing it. Or we saw something there that is like, we haven't done anything with this identity, or we haven't seen anybody approach this topic, and none of us here can. So why not find somebody who can do that?
We rely a fair amount on just going to shows like this and walking around the floor, seeing what we can find, going on social media a lot to find people that are more interesting. A really thing that we like to do is we'll put out large call outs for pitches about specific things. And those tend to get around. Artists will email other artists that they think are good for it, which is a good way that we find work. But it's really just, a lot of it is just we read all the pitches that come in, and we do like to find people that way. As long as it's a readable pitch, we'll always look at it, and it's...
You promise.
Yeah, we promise.
And you're still at the NIM?
Yes.
Okay.
Dropping like flies.
So let's see, we would do a lot of research through all sorts of ways. And I wouldn't say, for me personally, I actually didn't do that much research on Instagram. I would do a lot of my research using, first of all, websites like It's Nice That, which is a British website on art and design. I always found that really helpful. And I loved looking at art anthologies and illustration anthologies, also comics. And so I would find a lot of people through those anthologies, through going to comics and art fairs kind of worldwide. And I also really like when an artist will post all of their links to all of their friends' websites on their site, because then I'll follow all of those links. And I found actually a lot of people that way too. So really it's through a variety of ways, but I would say in general at the times we're not really looking at whether people are really popular on Instagram. It's really just about the conceptual quality of the work itself. So in that way, maybe it's a little different. And for me, I'm no longer working full-time at the Times. I'm working on a part-time job there. But yeah, I'm still an art director and still kind of matching artists with work and with companies.
I guess I have a unique situation in that I took on a job that someone else had been doing for 20 years in an institution that has been publishing many of the same people for almost 95 years. Some of them. But so part of that was that I inherited this stable of some of the greatest people doing this very niche thing, which is the gag cartoon. And I mean, I had multiple sort of almost conflicting imperatives. One was to continue to provide as much of a home and an income and a sense of stability for the people who are these greats who were who the fuck is this girl? And one was to bring in new people to broaden what it what gag cartoonist of the New Yorker, that sort of like who that character was, like the type of voice and perspective that was on offer there. And a third was to say, like, truly, I reached out to so many people. I had this list of like thousands of people when I started, and I was like, they're all going to be gag cartoonists. And of course, so many of these graphic memoirists and novelists were like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't want to make work inside a single box. Like, that's not how I think. That's not what I do. And so then it became very quickly like, it felt that I needed to like find a way to do longer form stuff to include those voices under the umbrella of the New Yorker, who I like, which is a publication I think that just wants to publish the best people working in these various different creative fields. So yeah, it's become more of a like figuring out who to target for which thing, figuring out what types of conversations to have with different people. And I would say I largely, like, again, I came in with this mega list. And the greatest way for finding new people since that original moment has honestly, I think for me, been asking people for recommendations. So when I bring on someone new, just talking to them about who they're excited about. It's the same as the, like, when people post their friends or like colleagues' works on their website. I don't know. I mean, I love going to cities around the world and scrolling through zine racks in the local comic book store, and I've also found people that way, and Instagram is great, but like truly, you know, you find someone who is a delight to work with, whose style you're excited about, and they always have a network of other people who are really cool. So
Now, the mythology has it that once you get that one assignment, that is the goal and it was met. But illustration, comics, cartooning is a business of volume. And you need that continuous kind of flow of projects and assignments coming in order to make a living. What kind of a experience do you have to have with that first-time illustrator or comic book artist or cartoonist in order to call them back for an assignment?
Not everybody, and it has to be the easiest person to work with, but if we have a bad experience with a person, we'd rather work with someone who's like stable and puts out good work on time than someone who's like an absolute mad genius, but flakes out for a year or something. We've been burned by a lot of people who just disappear or don't blow deadlines or don't take edits, and those people we just don't work with again generally because it's harder to, we're on a schedule and it's hard to just be reliable is the main thing, and just demonstrate that you're going to stick to the thing that you're going to do, and just be in communication always with the editorial team. If you can't meet something or you're having a problem, it's always just be communicating with editors, basically, I think is a good system to sort of stay in their good graces.
although I would say the flip side of that is like you talk about it as a volume industry, which it definitely is. And like one of my bugaboos is like someone who is just constantly sending emails or like revisions or drafts. So there's definitely like a need for someone to be like efficient and meet deadlines and be flexible and like take notes and not push back about everything. But it's also, I would say that like anyone who in their, and first piece, you get a bit of a, like, I get that it's exciting and, you know, you've told your mom and now you want to send me like 600 emails on a Saturday night between like midnight and 4 a.m. with different ideas. But like, there is also just like, you have to know that the number of things coming into the inbox are so huge. And that to sort of like be cool, like play it a little cool.
Yeah, I'm definitely not saying send me emails on a Saturday night.
We're all saying send us emails on a Saturday night. At the end, our emails will flash up on the screen.
Yeah. It's more like don't drop off the face of the earth.
That reminded me of, actually, just to be honest, one pet peeve that I've had is that, so at the Times, the process is you get an article, you send it out to the illustrator, and they come up with like 3 or more sketch ideas. And then as an art director, you receive those, you review them, you talk with the illustrator, and you choose one direction. And then you've made this agreement, and then they will go and finish that and bring it to final. A pet peeve of mine is when an illustrator will either come up with a final that's quite different than that agreed upon sketch, which has happened sometimes, or in that window between sketch and final, they'll come back with tons of emails, kind of asking for feedback along each step of the way, which actually sometimes I like. Like, I like checking in, but when it gets to be, 5 times, it's too much because, like, one has to remember that an art director, like, say at the Times, is dealing with 10 illustrators at a time. So that means that you're locked in these collaborative conversations with 10 people simultaneously, which makes the volume of email like very immense. And that's why you try to keep the process from sketch to final like as simple as possible. Then again, I was very much known for just going back and forth with illustrators a lot because I want them to feel proud about the work. I want really high quality work. But it's just about kind of honoring that process and, not creating huge volumes of email, I guess.
I guess for us at BuzzFeed, we had the advantage of we didn't have a lot of strict deadlines since we were publishing whenever we wanted to publish, basically. So didn't run into too much trouble with that. Sometimes when people would send in a sketch that was just too vague to know, one, is that a human being or is that a vase? Like, I don't know. So just remember, like,
Both.
Maybe that's the gag.
you're right, yeah, right. Maybe that is a yeah.
Sounds hilarious.
That was too they should have sent that one to the New Yorker, yeah. So just, I think sometimes we're all moving quick and we're moving fast, but make sure if you're sending in a sketch that it's communicating, enough so the art director can make some kind of a decision. And then I think just in general, people who are nice, it just goes such a long way. People who are considerate. Maybe don't send everything like, Friday night at 6:30. People have lives, so I always like that. And I would try to balance my approach to what I knew about the artist. If it was a newer artist that we hadn't maybe done that much with, I didn't mind hand-holding a little more, and I kind of liked that. And then with more established people, I expected them to deliver, and I wouldn't want to step on what they had already done so well. So.
Here's something tricky. I'm always surprised by unprepared students to enter the professional world, and they go, "I'm going for it," and you go, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! You might need a little more time to percolate and be ready." And then amazing students that they're not going to get their toe in the water unless you grab them by the ankle and shove it in the water and tell them you are ready. When is an amateur ready to be a professional? You have 30 seconds.
I mean, off the top of my head, I'll just say I think one of the things that I've seen, and this is both from art directing, but also like being, on the other side and going through an illustration program, it seems a lot of times that people that make that leap are the ones that are organized, they're consistent, and they just do it. They just know how to ask for money with a straight face, or just act like you are going to pay me for this. And it really, I think just putting your little shingle out there and being like, I'm not just your cousin that draws, like I'm an illustrator now. And with social media, it's really kind of all you have to do. I'll just say that. I think that's the first step, because I've seen people who weren't the best drawers, they weren't the funniest, they just kept acting like they were a professional. And they are.
I would say confidence is a big deal. You all the time get pitches from people that are like almost apologetic, and it's mostly just you have to be considerate of where it's coming from and why a person would want to feel that way. But it is sort of a turnoff when you're reading a pitch if they act like they can't do the thing that they're pitching. And the other thing is, consistency. Like if your portfolio is all over the place and some of the stuff looks really good and some of it doesn't, then we're not going to have a ton of confidence that you can deliver the good work, because how do we know we're going to get the good stuff and not the bad stuff that's on your website? So just sort of like having a body of work that you think is representative of what you can do out there and for people to see, I think.
No. One thing I learned, I was teaching a lot in Europe last year, and one thing that I heard from a lot of illustrators is that art directors here are really friendly, actually, especially compared to sort of the feeling that a lot of illustrators get in Europe is that they're not as much likely to be invited and talk to editors or art directors at companies there, whereas I feel like here in New York, it's actually quite an open, it's open, and you know, we meet with illustrators in person and like to make those one-on-one connections, like what Emma was saying. I think that's really, really important. And so what I found is that especially like, say, illustrators coming from Europe who come to New York to make connections here, it's really the ones that are confident and take the time to reach out to art directors directly that then start getting work. So I guess to that point, you know, there's like different ways of being an amateur. Like you can be, and I define that as like emerging. You know, you can be emerging in terms of your work, or maybe you're not yet connected with the community. Anyway, I don't know where I'm going with that. Take it away.
No, I mean, I'm, I guess, the only person up here who's not herself an artist. It's this crazy business that is not like hugely lucrative and is an incredible hustle, where you have to have confidence and ego to put yourself out there again and again, and you have to like walk into rooms or be able to like draft these emails and be like, I'm worthy of notice, like my work is important, and like that to me is already a nightmare. I'm glad I don't have to do it. And then of course, like you're faced with throwing all of this creative work that takes so much of yourself into this ether and either being rejected again and again or hearing nothing. So it's like, okay, so you have to develop this like ego and confidence that is met with like silence and rejection. And then, as we were saying before, like you can't just be the like egocentric jerk who's coming in and being like, but I know it's great, like I think it's great. Like at a certain point that gets old. So for us, I would say. So it's like you both have to like maintain that level of self-worth that is not being reinforced by other people, and then also be like friendly and like nice to get along with. It's sort of an impossible task, and like I think it's like a small group of neurotic sociopaths like do it really well, and I'm grateful to be able to work with them. But yeah, I mean, it is like to make the leap requires this huge amount of self-faith.
To think you're good, but to understand that not every publication can run everything that you like. We get a lot, you know, most publications run what, like 10% of what you get as pitches, like maybe if it's you run a lot of stuff, like.
So I don't know. It's this impossible balance of being bold and yet being humble and yet never giving up. And it goes on. It's not easy.
Yeah, and what I think the question in itself is really interesting, because nowadays, like, when are you a professional and when are you not a professional? Like, you know, and it used to be there were these like publications that once you got into that, it was almost like you're established, you are forever now a professional. And I don't see a lot of reality to that in our current landscape.
Publications used to have little cartoonists on staff.
Or the New Yorker. I mean, it used to be you could be not even a New Yorker cartoonist, maybe like first and foremost a New Yorker cartoonist, but you know, you would take your gags every Tuesday from publication to publication, and by the end of the day, you'd start with the people who paid the most, then you'd go to the place that had the donuts, and then like by the end of the day, you would have sold everything, and you could like go back to your nice house in Westchester. That's obviously like not what the life is now, and people are adapting, I think, hugely, and like learning to work in many different ways and not just, you know, do with one thing over and over. But I mean, yeah, it is. It's not like you make it and then it's like you are a career blank.
Yeah, so I think that's what everyone needs to understand too, especially when you're starting out. You're like, oh, if I just get that New Yorker or that New York Times commission, everything's going to be different. And there may be another route for you. It may not be getting published in any of these. It may be doing something for, you know, a combine tractor company publication, but they'll publish you every month. You know, there's all different ways to put this together. So remember that. I think that's important.
True, right? Do you have a farm equipment company that publishes comics?
Can anyone here hire me for that? I would like.
I'm not drawing a lawnmower. Too complicated.
I just thought of like, what would be the hardest thing for me to draw?
Yeah. Horses on Bicycles Quarterly. They pay horrible.
I remember after publishing my first piece for the New York Times, I thought I would need a second phone line to deal with the incoming phone line. I still have one phone line. The rumor has it that there are three main reasons why one person will not get published in that specific place they want to get published. One of them is these people don't like your work. One reason would be they do not know you exist. And one of them would be they know you exist, but they cannot get in touch with you. And this, to a certain degree, brings...
Got to get that second phone line.
True. But this brings in the issue of social media and the number one advice people give to people is like, are you on Instagram? You should be on Instagram. Everyone and their mother are on Instagram. And I think this already sounds dated right now. What else will someone do? How much in order do is your toolbox needs to be as far as your updated, competitive, specific website, the way you approach people, the way you scout people, the way you collect the names, the way you do the homework, the way you understand if certain publications are for your certain kind of artwork. What can we tell people to help them connect these two things? How do I appear? How do people get in touch with me? And do I have to be a social media darling to attract attention?
Okay, yeah, I don't think you have to be a social media darling. It's just kind of like, for us specifically, we reach out to new people all the time to pitch us, but we're not commissioning specific work from people we haven't worked with before generally. So when someone pitches us, it just needs to be a pitch that we like. But you don't have to be a social media darling, but you do have to have a body of work that we can see. You have to show us in a pitch that you can do the thing that you want to do. You can't say you can't be like, I want to do a 10-page feature that's journalism and I'm interviewing people and traveling. You have to pay me a lot of money for all this stuff. And we look at your portfolio and it's all gag cartoons. We don't have the confidence to put that investment in you, both the editorial money and the editorial time. We don't know if that's something you can do. So just sort of having a body of work that's representative of the thing that you're trying to pitch us on is the helpful thing. I don't think you need to, have 100,000 Twitter followers to be a good cartoonist. That's not true at all. Yeah.
So being at BuzzFeed, I was kind of like in the belly of the beast, and I was there from 2014 on when stuff like the dress and the llamas running around. And it was probably the beginning of the end.
Of the world? Or
of the world, yeah.
The world.
Just that one day.
Yeah, right, that one day, yeah. Spock died, and then it was all over. So it was really fascinating to observe that in-house and to be like so much older than the whiz kids and the ones that really did know it. And one of the cool things was knowing that even like the 21-year-old in the room didn't know everything about every platform. And I'm teaching a course right now at SVA on illustration for social media. And one of the things that I know about it is it's going to change and it's going to continue to change. So, and Instagram is looking a little shabby right now. It's still my go-to thing for seeing a lot of art, but people are doing newsletters now. More and more people are trying to take control of what they're making and what they're getting paid for what they're making. And Instagram has been great because it's been free, and Instagram is making a ton of money on all of us putting our free stuff there. So I do think the times they are changing. I don't know what's next. I think what was exciting about Instagram in the beginning was it was so many visual people being able to put their stuff out there, and it was voices that we hadn't seen a lot of, and they hadn't been able to show us as much as they were able to there. So there will be something else that lets us do that, and I will be trying to stay cool enough to know what that is.
I don't think like chasing what the next big thing is the thing that should take up all your time or thoughts. You know?
Yeah.
Like I think, it's
For us,
Go where
that
the
was
people-
a priority because
Yeah,
we
well-
were at BuzzFeed and that was
Yeah.
supposed to be our game. But
that's our job as people trying to find people to stay on top of what the hot new place for the art is. But if you as an artist just worry about, if there's a hot new place, you can just take the art you already made and put it there. It's not,
Exactly.
try to keep current with where the people are. But yeah, but
We were trying to decide who was going to go next.
oh, yeah.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have just hired so many people, again, I think I've already said this, but with hardly any Instagram account, but who just had a body of work on a website that was coherent, that, I think you need at least like 12 pieces to begin to see a pattern in their work. So there needs to be like some critical mass there. I think a lot of students start out and they have maybe like 4 pieces that perhaps could fit for editorial. And oftentimes what I will tell them is to create pieces that are directly in response to an article they find, as a way to just start creating more of a massive work that feels more editorial. But really, in the end, like that's all I would be looking for: a body of work that feels coherent, that has, great technique, great thought behind it, interesting, coherent use of color, and it doesn't really matter if you have an Instagram account or not. I think it is another, of course, really helpful way to market yourself, but I've also had really interesting conversations with artists recently. One in particular who had a really big Instagram following and then just completely deleted the account. He felt like he was creating comics, and he had come out with a comic in Spain, and he felt that that people were just consuming it on social media and not actually reading the story and ingesting the content of what he had spent a year creating. That Instagram is a way for us to just feel like we're experiencing or consuming something just by looking at the image, and perhaps that can be a disadvantage to people who are working in comics, who are creating stories where you want people to pick up a book and really read the story and not just think that you've experienced the work by looking at it. So I just, that's an interesting dialogue, I think, and, I don't necessarily think that everyone should just delete their accounts. I think there's things to be gained from having, many things, a portfolio site, an Instagram site, whatever else you want. But, it's an important thing to think about.
Yeah, I will confess that, like, on my phone, if you look at my screenshots, it's just, like, a lot of screenshots of people's Instagram accounts that I'm, like, a couple beers in, like, watching TV in bed, just being, like following threads of, like, this person keeps liking this person's Instagram. So I'm just, like, actually finding things and then the next day being like, oh, this is good. But yeah, that being said, I think like when someone is pitching me, I don't like immediately go and see how many Instagram followers they have. The thing I actually feel like, sort of as Matt was saying, like I notice first is whether they have included in their pitch the right things to let me know that they are the right person to work for the New Yorker. And oftentimes, in the most basic way, that is just having read the New Yorker, or like having like looked at what we're publishing, because so often someone will be like, here's a link to my website, here's a link to my Instagram, like here's a fully fleshed out pitch, and then it will just be something that we've done very recently, or like in a tone that we would never publish, or just like, so I mean it's really there. Whether or not you have like a social media following is much less important than the sort of like package you are carefully presenting for the thing you want to be doing, for the place you want to be doing it for. There were so many fours in that.
Since we have a lot of people with dual or triple roles here, the question that comes up again and again is, an artist being the owner of a small business. I mean, if you go to the bank to get a loan, this is the category that they're going to put you in. And actually, if you want to see a banker's head explode, ask them for a mortgage and write artist on the application. But being the owners of a small business, and Matt, you said, don't spend all of your time on the business aspect. how much time, what percentage of time should an artist invest in running their small business, including their promotion, and how much in creating content, making sure that their artistic soul is intact and they're really experimenting and doing things. I'm not asking you because I think you have the answer. I'm asking you because we don't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll say like when I was freelancing until fairly recently, like I have an LLC and I have all that stuff, but I think like I think spending all your time, I think it really depends on what you want to do. If you want to self-publish a book, spend a lot of time promoting yourself so you have people to pay for the book that you're self-publishing. But if you want to like pitch a book to a publisher, if you want to pitch a website to do comics for us or the New Yorker or BuzzFeed or you want to do illustration for the Times or whatever, I think you spend more time on the pitch then and the creative work, and then worry about how to get your taxes set up right after you have the work already. If it's putting the cart before the horse a little bit, I think, to worry a ton about the business stuff. Like I didn't get my LLC together until I had me and my partner got a book deal for a humor book, and then it was like, oh, we have to like figure this out. But it was,
If you're not making any money, your taxes will be easy.
exactly.
That's not what we're looking for. Let me make this clear.
Can't tax 30% of nothing, guys.
I mean, I probably have no answer for this question. I mean, I'm terrified of this idea of me as a business, and I always have been. And I did the MFA illustration program, and it's just every day graduation is coming closer and closer, and I was like, oh my god. So yeah, I just did whatever I could to get in-house somewhere to kind of sidestep that, but still do illustration. I think it is a model. I see some people doing it. BuzzFeed still has a lot of in-house illustrators, and other organizations do too. So I just want to put it out there. It is a possibility, and it's been good for me. So yeah, that's all I got. I'm so scared.
Yes, me too. I would love advice on that as well. I mean, I was an art director really working 60 hours a week, so devoting all of my time to that for 7 years. And now I am still, working in that field, but also spending time doing painting and also kind of doing hand-drawn clothing and kind of beginning to consider myself as a business. But again, I'm completely new to it, so.
What are you going to do?
This is a deep existential question. Yeah.
That's for a different panel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an artist, so I can say that early on in my post-college life, I was a freelance art critic and art journalist. And that was sort of a moment when I realized I didn't have the metabolism for doing this thing that is being in charge of your own business that's run from your kitchen table where you wear no pants. Like, I was like, I can't do this day after day. I'm losing my mind, and I need to talk to other humans, and I need to go to a space at a certain time and leave a space and have water cooler talk. That's what feeds my soul. But yeah, and I think it's worthwhile for people, especially since we've talked about there isn't really a career path to doing this thing in that you just become a New Yorker cartoonist or whatever. I think it's worthwhile for people to consider what balance of structure and lack of structure they want, and that it's not somehow, I don't think it's better or more noble to be hustling all the time or be your own business before you're ready to do that, and that it's fine to have lots of jobs. It's fine to do things that are artistic and do things that are totally just going and working in a place so you can talk to other humans throughout the course of the day and come home with some cash in your pocket and not have to worry about when this publication that said they'd pay you 3 months ago is actually going to pay you. So yeah, I think given the sort of splintering of the image of the artist as this self-fueled creator who can do this thing and somehow their genius will make them money. I don't know if that was ever a thing, but certainly not right now, certainly not in this industry. So yeah, I think just not worrying so much about, it sucks being a small business owner. That's so hard. It's hard if you own a laundromat, and it's certainly hard if your laundry is just little pieces of you that you're chipping off and putting out into the world. So, yeah, I don't know.
Laundry will be a different panel as well.
I would love to be on that panel.
And I would like to close the organized section of our panel with a very, very specific question. I would like you to each give one solid piece of advice to everyone in the room they could follow after they exit the room to make their artistic practice better.
All right, I'll go first. Okay, so I said this. I was at an industry day panel at a comic school a couple weeks ago, and I said the same exact thing. Okay, just don't make me Google you if you pitch us. If you're going to put together a pitch, make sure everything you want us to see is there. Don't make me find it. I don't want to have to do the legwork to find out who you are because we get so many pitches. And I'll do it because we want to review every pitch thoroughly, but it's not an encouraging sign. And read the pitch guidelines is the other thing. Because, there's that very apocryphal story about Van Halen and the M&Ms and the contract writer. And the idea was that they couldn't have a certain color for M&Ms, the cocktail, and they're in their room. And the idea was like if a venue missed that, they had to go check all the machinery moving around because someone could die with all the complicated stuff, which means they didn't read all the stuff. So if someone sends in a pitch that doesn't follow the guidelines, if we say we don't take completed work and someone sends in completed work, it doesn't inspire confidence that you're going to be able to follow edits and the rest of our process.
Also send us M&Ms.
Also send M&Ms are good. Yeah.
I would say one of the things that I always liked was that when people would follow up, but follow up in a way of just like, hey, I have new work. I thought you might like to see it. Just something like that instead of like, are you going to hire me now? And there's so many great ways to just keep in touch with art directors that does not involve like, am I going to get hired right now? And so just know that they're human beings. They're really trying. Art directors are the biggest fans, especially if they're doing something like comics in any way. There must be some love there. Emma, maybe. I
Are you looking to me to see if there's some love?
Right, yeah.
There's love.
Well, I know you took over an existing position, but I think that's just part of doing this. So understand that, and they really are trying to make the right connections. So, and they're people, and they love getting nice emails that say, "Hey, I saw you guys did this cool thing. That was really awesome." And
we're all expecting emails as well as M&Ms.
So I think that's what stood out to me when I was commissioning. I like that a lot.
Yeah, my advice is always it's the summer camp pool advice of like buddy up. In that, I think this world can feel very competitive because there are very few places that are publishing, and you're all sending to the same places. But more than it being competitive, it's like incredibly isolating and grueling, and like the best way to get good advice about who to pitch and how to pitch and feedback that other people, it's just find a network of people who are doing the same thing as you and then like help each other. Because that is like, I've seen people who are more collaborative and like good at sharing information grow alongside each other much more than I have seen people who like are sort of like sheltered and working in isolation, because so much of the work is in isolation. You're like actually sitting at home trying to come up with ideas, and I think the more people can like help give each other feedback and foster each other and help each other when there are setbacks, like the easier it is to keep doing this thing that's very hard.
Yeah, and going off of that, I always think that starting collectives or starting anthologies, starting projects together that can be a way of self-publishing and a way of getting your work out there in front of other people, I think is really powerful and fun also. Going off of something that Will said, I would say that when I get emails from illustrators, I really just like simple emails that can really just be 3 sentences, a short introduction, and then just a link to the portfolio. One thing I would advise against is I don't like when illustrators tell me that their work is perfect for the New York Times or for any other publication, and I've seen that quite a lot, actually. this is what I do, it's perfect for you. I would just delete that sentence. And then my last piece of advice would be like for anyone in here who has, always wanted to reach out to an art director or has, a certain publication that you want to work for, I would just say, take this as an opportunity to, in the next week, reach out to that person.
So a student asked me the other day, and they might be in the audience. So the question was, should I go after your panel and show my portfolio to these people? I said you could, but my approach would be a little different. Why don't you could find their email, and you could just shoot them an email and say, it was a wonderful panel, thank you so much for all of your advice. By the way, just attaching a couple of JPEGs of my work, I would love you to have it in my files. And that issue of approach is really one that goes beyond social media. It has to do person to person, and if you didn't grow up with the skills, you can learn those skills and really hone them and make them sensitive and intuitive. I will crowbar my 2 pieces of advice in there. One of them is very easy. It's set your alarm clock to an hour earlier every morning. Wake up and invest it every morning. So at some point, there's going to be absolutely no sleep. 1 hour, back your clock and get up and invest it in your artwork. And the other one is a little more difficult to follow, and it goes more pitching, less bitching. We will take 3 questions. Anyone would have, yes?
Emails, postcards, what do you like? How do people get in touch? Best way.
Folks?
Emails.
Yeah.
Like a lot of places are remote, and a lot of people work from home a lot of days, and just I think the get physical mail. We go check it. I think once every 2 months, and we'll have it'll be like a CD of like some person's cartoons, and it's like I don't have a CD drive on my computer anymore. Yeah.
How is it the New York Times? Do you check your mail a little more regularly?
Yeah, a little bit more. And we did have a whole wall that we would use for visual reference that actually a lot of people on the floor would use for visual reference.
And you saw it in one of the slides too.
Yeah. So in that way, we did really like postcards.
So postcards are not dead.
They're not completely dead.
Okay, good.
They
More of a
should live
legacy.
on.
You're like a legacy publication.
A
But I
legacy.
feel like I get a postcard and I'm like, ooh, I like this postcard. And then I just like pull up the person's website and throw out the postcard, like recycle it immediately. And like,
Almost.
so it's, yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
And on postcards, when you're pitching to somebody and they want to hire you for a web, maybe it's less of a connection too. We don't care what it looked like in print because we're never going to print it.
Okay. Yes?
So as someone with like a very variable style or in a lot of different ways, do you find that appealing to show that someone is flexible, or do you prefer them to have a really concrete visual style? Because I see a lot of mainstream illustrators have actually concrete visual style.
So concrete visual style or showing stylistic flexibility. What do we like to see?
I want to say 2 things. One, I think as an art director, I need to be absolutely certain or really close to I know what you're going to send after I've approved the sketch that comes back. So I don't want surprises. But I've also, as somebody who has put together a career drawing and directing drawing, I think there is this focus on you have to have this one style and then that will be your style till you die and that is how you'll make your money. That's not how it works. So I think what I do like to see though is if you have gotten to a style that you can solve a lot of problems with, you like it, your network, your advisors, they like it. If you can put that to the top and that's your really strong stuff and that's what you're comfortable getting hired for, I would do that. I think you can do something different and you can put it on your website, but clear groupings make sense for me.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. Because I think that, as art directors, we do just we're hiring you to do a specific thing. And so, the work on your portfolio is a way for me to identify how you'll solve a problem. And so I just want to make sure that I know how you'll solve that problem. And so, yeah, I think that if you do have multiple styles, they should be grouped in a clear way. I've definitely hired illustrators who have an illustration practice, but then also have several strands of their work that are more fine art. And I've hired them for that, but they had separated it in a very clear way, in the way that they present their work. So, yeah.
One more question?
Yeah, actually, I have a question because I know a lot of art directors. They're both like directors as well as artists. Do some of you like have your own website with your personal email? So I wonder if you might like artists to reach out to you through your personal email if they cannot find your work.
That's a tricky question.
I never minded.
Yeah, I don't mind it either.
Yeah, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you say like, I couldn't find your personal email, I couldn't find your work email, and so I'm emailing you here, it's whatever. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
I don't mind DMs either,
Yeah.
like on Instagram or Facebook. That's
Oh,
fine
but
too.
Facebook messages are so hard. I
They're
feel like I
awful.
recently just discovered like a trove of like 300. Like
I found so
I
many
would say
third
that's the
cousins.
worst way to do it. If
Yeah.
you're gonna like cut
Yeah,
out
the
one,
bigger
cut
problem
out
is
that.
you may be sending it to like
Social media manager's going to see it and not.
So
Yeah.
so don't be hurt if you don't hear back either. You may be sending it to a dead end for a little bit.
The one thing I would recommend against is just like tagging them on social media. Like if you scroll through, like
yeah.
I do some of the Nibs social media, and I'll like scroll through the Nibs like Instagram mentions, and it's just like people like drawing cartoons and tagging us, like that's their pitch. And I'm not gonna look at those.
I get so excited because I think someone's tagged me in a cute photo, and then I'm like, ugh.
Yeah. It's just another Ziggy.
Matt, Will, Emma, and Alexandra, thank you very much for your time. We know you might have other things to do on a Saturday night.